Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Just got off the plane from Toronto, home, tired, but I figured I've got to do this wrap-up video now because I'm so far behind on stuff. I thought I was getting caught up, then YouTube comes, and then all this other material is built up. Plus, on this visit from Toronto, so much material. On top of what I've already uploaded, I have all Thursday with Angela Gilbert-Young and George Taylor of On Track Audio. That's going to be a great video series. I'm not going to tip my hand too much. I have shown you in a YouTube short a little bit. If you haven't watched that, you may want to check it out. But probably next weekend, I'll have time enough to release it on Friday. You're definitely going to watch that. And this subwoofer amp that I'm building with Angela Gilbert-Young, collaborating with, from just an aesthetic perspective, unbelievable. It's going to be so cool. But the show itself, I need to get even some more videos that I haven't released yet. Because on my top, this is kind of my best of show report, although inevitably I do these off the cuff. I do have a few notes here, but I'm going to leave some out. In general, there's some things that I think required even more video coverage in terms of curation of this 30-minute videos in one room that I really liked. So I'm going to be releasing that. I also, excuse me, I attended a full demo and seminar on the Arc Genesis of Anthem, their room correction. I'm going to be uploading that this week. I thought that deserved its own video and curation for those that really want to dive in deep there. So there's still some more videos to come from Toronto, and I'm going to mention them here, but just be aware of that as I go through this list. Now, the first thing, I don't even need to look at my list in terms of favorite things at the show was meeting many of you guys. Took pictures with many of you, and it's just Toronto. The people there were great. I mean, strangers, people in the industry, people I met on the streets. We went to dinner one night. People were friendly, talking to me about my hat. Pete and I felt welcome, safe everywhere we went, both at the show, elsewhere. Cool town. Definitely going to be on my agenda, part of my annual agenda going forward. And I think I will go to the Montreal one as well, because I got to give a shout out to the organizer of the show as well. Phenomenal job. Definitely from a press perspective. Looked like a lot of people showed up on Friday, but I didn't see those lines or lots of problems. I know there was problems with parking. The hotel had problems. The hotel had problems with parking and internet. But that's not so much the show organizers. I was very impressed with the family atmosphere, the camaraderie, and it just had a vibe that was positive. If you watch my awards banquet, everybody was even emotional about some of the things. I didn't even know these people, but I still felt for what was going on there and the camaraderie. So it's definitely a different type show, and one I would highly encourage you, especially if you're in the area. But I think it's worth the trip. I definitely would make the trip again. And then also meeting some of the distributors, dealers, that was phenomenal. That's why I want to curate this other video for Eon Arts and Oracle. If you don't know Jack from Oracle, and then the gentleman with Eon Arts and that brand, that's something I think I wanted to release that video separately, because those are two brands that definitely stood out as top of the pack that wowed me. Eon Arts I knew nothing about, and I'm surprised I don't, because it's very innovative. It almost reminds me of when I learned about Ari Surratt being more than just a really cool chassis with high price tags. The design is so innovative and stuff. Eon Arts has a lot of those same reminiscent feelings when I got to learn more about them. And I never heard anybody tell me about them. I never heard anybody say anything. And this is the first time I've had access to them, and I'm very impressed. And of course, Oracle, being in the business as long as Jack has been, and top-notch guy, top-notch products from his CD players to his turntable. Definitely check out the full video. I'm going to release on that this week, but I wanted to give them a shout out right off the top. I also want to talk about what I bought from the show, because as I say, you can talk all you want about what's great. What do people put their money where their mouth is? And so what I bought from the show, number one, was the Denon headphones. If you had earbuds that use Massimo, it's a medical equipment technology company that bought Denon a bunch of other companies in the industry. And people thought at the time, what is that all about? Well, they've actually leveraged their medical equipment technology, which in one case has the ability to do audibility tests, like audiologists test babies in terms of their hearing. They can't react to questions you ask them because they're babies. So they have this technology that can measure the ear follicles reaction to different tones. I don't know how they do it. It's amazing technology. I went through the calibration. Pete, the Greek, had it, and I caught it on camera because I could film him. I couldn't film myself. But yeah, it's a really impressive A/B demo because you can hear right after. Very easy to do, and I immediately bought that product. And so there's a lot more to come on that, certainly when I get it. And there's also a discount code. So watch that video. I have the QR code. It was just for people in Canada at the time, but I think they're going to release it, a version for America as well. So stay tuned for that, or give me an email if you can't find it. Another thing I'm going to buy is the Musical Fidelity A1 amp. If you watch my videos, I said that was the British Fidelity A1 was the first amp that I ever owned in the 80s. It was the first audiophile product I think I bought. That and a pair of Polk 10Bs. And it was such a sweet amp, ran hot. Everybody remembered it because you could fry an egg on top of it. And it did have a problem with the volume control. I eventually had to pivot from it. I went to McCormick and then stayed with McCormick forever, legacy and upgrades. But there was something about that amp, just nostalgia purposes, number one, and the fact that it just punched so much higher. At the time, it was like $300, and it was ranked in Stereophile up there with a lot of other higher-end amps, and people just loved the circuit design and the sound of that. It just needed modern parts, and I always thought in my head, man, but that amp, if they just really used a better Alps volume control or other thing, I'd love to hear it today. And sure enough, Musical Fidelity felt the same way, and enough people, I guess, in their test market felt the same way, because this product, the British Fidelity A1, in many respects is probably the product that put them on the map and got them stereophile coverage. Probably the first product they ever got reviewed, and such great response to. And so they re-released it. I talked to the distributor at Toronto, great guy. He had the Focal, the Hyphn, the Monitor Audio, name, and Musical Fidelity. And I told him that the A1 was my first amp, and he immediately high-fived me. He's like, you're my kind of guy. And he says, I've got 5 of them, 4 of them spoken for, one's for you. I said, keep it for me. I want to get that. I just, for not only nostalgia purposes, my daughter's going off to college. She could use that if she wants to put together a system in her dorm or whatever, or I'll use it here, maybe swap it in and out just to see what it sounds like in today's world. But a great piece, even at today's budget prices. I think it's going to be a winner. So stay tuned for that being in my system soon. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about was I did see the Bird of Prey tone arm, and as I mentioned in one of my daily wrap-ups, I'm getting more and more an itch again to put together a vinyl rig. Haven't figured out the turntable cartridge yet, but I think at some point I know the tone arm I'm going to get. But that's still further down the list. I did have the propeller sub higher on my list, but I couldn't contact Bruce, and I'm now doing my do-it-yourself sub, so that's further down the list. But elevating higher in the list is getting a tape deck. And I've always, if I wanted to get a tape deck, it was going to be the Nagra. That's just, it's a legendary piece. It's one that just I've always fallen in love with. I said, if I do tapes, that's the piece I'm going to get. And then I met one of the individuals at Nagra that's in R&D at this show. He said he's got a connection to, and so if that ends up putting together and I can get one, that's another thing I will buy from the show. And it was great to see Nagra there with, go ahead and go off my list of great rooms, was the AudioNec room. Now, in general, the sound at the show was nothing that I would say wowed me. Certainly when I come back here with the Bach dedicated room and good equipment, everything here is superior from a sound quality perspective, as you should be. As you graduate in going to shows, like as I started, everything I saw at the show when I first started sounded better. When I went in the 90s, was better than what I had at home. So the progress you go through is, yeah, you got to get better gear to start. You start learning what gear fits your taste and your budget and can maximize performance. But then you go to shows every year and you start learning, hey, I saw that in a room last year. It sounded better than it did this year. And you start realizing it's not really the gear all the time. In fact, a lot of times it's how it's set up in the room and how much treatments and things that happen in the room. And then you get smarter yourself at home and you start realizing, hey, I don't need to buy new speakers. I just need to set them up better or treat my room better, or then get acclimated to DSP and using things strategically to dial things into your taste even more and more. And then things like add-ons like the Bach take it to a whole new level. But this is the graduation that you go through as you evolve, if you can go to all the shows over the year like I have and get that learning curve experiences. So now I'm at the point where, yeah, you get to the point where you rarely hear anything at the show better. And then especially sometimes shows like this have rooms, especially the hotel rooms, with that laminate floor was causing all kinds of problems. And I got confirmation, not only anecdotally from Pete, who said that he was hearing the same thing, but we did a seminar with Paradigm and Anthem. They did a room correction seminar on their Arc Genesis room correction product. And in that seminar, which I'll release later this week, it's a whole hour-long video I filmed, and it actually showed measurements that they took in the room with their speakers, and it's a mess. So it wasn't just my ears, like I thought at first. Pete agreed. Those rooms were not really great. And so if you thought it sounded good, that's fine. It will sound probably even better if you put that equipment in a dedicated room. Now, if you thought it sounded poorly, like I thought initially, don't blame the gear. I mean, a lot of that gear, the Perot room, the Triangle, great gear. The Audio Group Denmark with the Borison speakers and the AVIC stuff. If you didn't think it met the price points that they were asking for the gear, yeah, part of it is that room, a large part of it, not really the gear. So keep that in mind. And even in the bigger conference rooms, it didn't have as much of the sound quality problems with the room, but the show was so well attended. The noise floor was just so loud. I mean, I don't think I ever went into the Acora room where it wasn't super loud. So, you know, from a metric standpoint of can you hear anything better than your home? No, not if you have loud noise floor. You know, you have to be honest about the fact that you can't get over that kind of noise floor. Unless you have a really noisy house, you should have a better environment and your gear dialed in better than what you hear. So don't go attributing this gear sucks, this room sucks, and blame the gear. A lot of it's just the nature of show conditions. So what I like to do is look at the potential of the gear and which type of products stand out to me from their design, quality of people behind it, and those metrics you can get a real good impression of regardless of room issues. And so AudioNec really impressed me because I got to meet the distributor in Canada, and he was talking to me about the speaker, which I knew a lot about already from Munich coverage. You can watch my coverage there. But it's such a smartly done speaker, especially for my taste. It's somewhat open baffle with the mid-range and the tweeter, and then it's got sealed box bass modules. That can be done in an array like this. And if you've heard me in the past, I like sealed box bass, especially for the lowest frequencies, given that oomph for the true low frequencies. I do like open baffle for the higher bass frequencies, but they have sealed box bass that can be done in an array, and that's what I heard at Munich. And then open baffle for the mid-range and tweeter, but that mid-range covers up to 10,000 hertz. So you don't have crossover between two dissimilar drivers in very critical frequency areas where you hear a lot of music. And that is very tough to get right. So many speakers, you can put two fancy drivers here, but if you don't have them melding right, just inherently, it's hard to get this and this to meld right. Look at them. You know, they're not designed the same. They're not the same material. They're not in the same cabinet. When you have one driver doing all the work and can do it properly, you know, it's much more sophisticated than just one driver and put some sealed box subs on it. But that AudioNec is smartly designed and has a lot of potential. I don't think the potential was realized in that room totally, but you could definitely sniff it, and I was very impressed. And with the Nagra gear, excellent. They had some other electronics in there that were top notch too. But probably the one room where I think sound quality raised to the level of where I got goosebumps was, and let me just say, if I get goosebumps, it's not just because of the gear. It also has to do with, is the song good? Is the volume good? And is the noise floor good? And there was a point at which I went back on to the Hyphn, Monitor Audio Hyphn, when very few people were in there. And Pete and I were in there. And I think it was the last day. And we had the sweet spot. And the noise floor was very low in the room at that time. And we got to hear 20 minutes of them playing the Hyphn. And that finally gave me at least a sound quality bar that was high enough for me to get goosebumps and really feel the potential of the Hyphn, even more than I mentioned after that first day in my wrap up. And again, it's a speaker that I think takes nuance to set up, and I kept on wanting to maybe toe it in a little bit. And then I think people can say it may sound a little dry and too accurate, too flat. Sometimes people like a little more of a dip. That's something I can easily do. I don't discount a speaker like that. I like them to be flat, and then I can do my own tailoring to my ears at home with DSP or setup, room treatments or whatever. That, to me, I'd rather it be that way. But I can see people thinking it is a more sterile sounding speaker from the mids and up, but it is so pure, distortionless, detailed, dynamic. But the real kicker with that speaker that I wasn't expecting is I think the bass was phenomenal. One of the best bass performances I had ever heard from just two floor standing speakers, because they are launching the bass right where the mid-range is. So many speakers have the mid-range much higher, and then the bass modules are down low, the drivers. And what happens, I'm sensitive to it. Some people don't care. It doesn't matter to them. That's fine. But for me, I don't like that. It's a deal breaker for me. If the soundstage kind of collapses, you end up, it makes more difference than people think. If those bass drivers only did 20 hertz, yeah, it'd be omnidirectional. It wouldn't be noticeable. But inevitably, these bass drivers play high enough up that they become directional, become noticeable, and it does bring the soundstage down if you don't have an array like this to provide that vertical height. Or like the Hyphn did brilliantly, or like the Aries Seurat Aurora. They're all time-aligned and launching from the same area. And for me, that presents the soundstage, more realistic. And the bass performance, whatever they're doing with those facing drivers, it's working. Okay. I was even remarking to the distributor as we were listening to the Focal Grand Utopias after that demo, the Hyphns were playing, and I said, "Can you hear that right now? That sounds so real, even in the next partition over, so much more real than any other speaker playing bass where you're that far apart." It just had that oomph and that realism that I thought was perfect, near perfect, and nothing's perfect, but near perfect, so realistic. And I did get goosebumps on certain songs because you had the noise floor, the quality of song that was playing. I think it was an Eva Cassidy or whatever. It was great. And so thumbs up to the Hyphn. It's even impressive. It grew on me even more. I wouldn't say it's surpassed the IO Designs for this year's Find of the Year and New Speaker of the Year. I think the top end of the IO was really good, but there's a lot to like about the Hyphn, and I can see people, debating on that. They're in the same price points. So again, definitely put that on your list if that's in your price point. Excuse me. Of course, Acora blew everybody away. Pete, it was his favorite. The noise floor for me is always bad. What I love about Acora is they almost go into these shows with the one arm tied behind their back. It's huge room. There's always tons of people in there. Loud noise. One seat is usually the best. But anywhere you sit, they are able to get high level performance. It's just, you're never going to get the highest ceiling because it's so noisy, big room. It's not tailored. And let me tell you something. That VRC one, their new reference speaker is great, obviously, phenomenal. But he could have brought his lower models in there, and it would have sounded very similar. he's done it before. That's what he made his name on before he came out with the VRC1. The smaller models can do similar performances to what that VRC1 did in that room. So if you like that sound and can appreciate what he's able to accomplish in a very difficult room, high noise floor, all that stuff, check out his other models if you can't afford that one. I know that model is outside of 99% of people's budgets. These other models definitely are worth checking out. And again, he's worked with Associated Gear. Now, this time he did D'Agostino. He had some ARC phonostage, I think. But that SAT turntable, that was a hit. Phenomenal job on that SAT turntable. Now, it cost 2 Ferraris probably to buy it. Not practical for most people, but that's part of what these shows are. Bring the best you can, showcase it, and at least window shop, okay? So thumbs up, Acora, as always. It's like a blanket on my best of wrap-up shows. Now, I was very surprised to see this speaker there, the Tidal Acoras. But what I was really impressed with was this distributor in Canada. You think everybody looks down on Canada as being second-class citizens to the U.S. in terms of high-end brands and stuff. But when you look at Win Audio, the distributor there, and what he carries, the Karan, the Tidal, Kalista, Goldman, and then how he sets it up in these almost jewelry-type cases that you would expect at Tiffany's or Hermes, does everything at a super high-end level. And again, when you're paying these kind of prices, that part of it is value for that aesthetic and luxury. He's providing it. When you walked in that room, you felt like this is high end. And those prices, yeah, nobody can justify these prices in the hobby on strictly performance metrics. Just so, it's silly to start doing that. We can't do that even with clothes. These t-shirts should probably cost $5 instead of $25. But, that's all relative. For people that want that experience, can afford it, he's giving you the high-end experience. That room felt high-end. The sound was high-end. The Tidal Acoras, phenomenal speakers. Just for cost no object budgets, it's a must listen to. In the U.S., if you're not in Canada, Win Audio is the one that carries them there. If you're in the U.S., I can put you in touch with Rick Brown. If you're in California, you can check out his setup. In fact, I'm going to have music clips. That's one of the videos I'm behind on, is some music clips from Rick Brown's house with the Tidal Acora. So they were top notch. I talked about Eon Arts and Oracle. I'm going to have a video on them, so stay tuned for that with more information. Focal was also in the room with the Hyphn. For my taste, I like the Hyphn better, but the Grand Utopias were great. I mean, they reminded me in a lot of ways of my Magico M9s because they can create the scale when he played a piano where you really felt like the grand piano was in front of you. The scale was there, and the amount of bass it can produce and fill that room. That's the type of room almost that kind of speaker needs. It's not practical for most people's listening rooms, but giving you a chance to see such dynamics and scale. And obviously, I think listening to the M9 and their dedicated room at Magico and then Rhapsody, that's a huge advantage over the Focal Grand Utopias at this show. But he did a good job of getting at least close to that performance, building a room within a room. Definitely wasn't as good, I think, as the M9s, but there's a difference in price too. And one thing I will say about the Focal, looks-wise, that black and white finish on the Grand Utopias, I like black and white. And then there are other colors that they offer. Very much a check mark on their box for people that put a lot into the aesthetics and having that variety. So while I don't think it's in the ballpark quite yet of the M9 for what I've been able to demo, I think it was a very impressive performance, and there's some aesthetic advantages with the Focal as well. Also, Artist Cloner. I keep having to look at it to remind me of the name. These are great people. I met them at the awards banquet, and I didn't go into their room. I don't think it was even open on day one when I was on floor 4. And then I got to go into it, luckily, today. I wish I had more time. This is a brand that does everything. everything from the cables to the power distributor to the amps, and I think even the server and the DAC. I wish I could have spent more time learning even more, and the speakers are very beautiful. He's got a thin layer. It's a composite of how he puts it together, and then it's got a slate thin layer to dress it up. Now, slate is very porous and can be brittle until you affix it. Once you affix it, it should be. I had slate in my house. I had some slate tiles, and man, they chip so easily until you get them installed and put on something. So I don't think you're going to have it. They become quite strong once affixed. But you have to like that gray, dark gray style. But it caught the light really beautifully in that room. So if that's your style, it might be an attractive speaker. The actual cabinet material is a composite of a bunch of strong things that I think is a smarter way to do the entire cabinet. So he seemed to know exactly what he was doing. He set up the room as best as possible for those difficult hotel rooms and was getting at least quality sound, not optimum. I'm sure that system sounds a lot better in a dedicated room, but I was impressed. And the aesthetics of the amps, the actual handles were on the right and left side. Makes it so easy to carry. Instead of these front or nothing to be able to carry the amp, that alone gave me thumbs up. And his prices weren't that ridiculous considering the hobby and a brand that does it all. Very few. You got Erie Surratt, you got MBO, you got Macintosh, you got PBN, Griffin. Not too many can do it all, okay? I think I even have a video of the best brands that do it all. You can look in my archive. There aren't that many. It took me a long time to even come up with 10. So I'm adding Artist Cloner to the list, and I don't know where I would slot them. I need more experience with them, but definitely a find from this show that thumbs up. Just that's all I can say. Now, on the budget end, there wasn't a whole lot of budget brands there. But number one, I met Thomas in Stereo again. I saw him in Expona and liked his tube amp and definitely looked like a high value product. And now he had a solid state amp, 70 watts per channel, TS75. It's easy to remember the name, Thomas in Stereo, 75 watts. And great. I mean, sounded great with those speakers that were unique. Well, they're not totally unique. Some people say it's a Tecton clone, but I felt that the cabinet material was better and the bass didn't have that boxiness that I had heard in the past with at least one model of Tecton. I don't want to blanket make generalizations, but I felt the bass was better with this model than the Tecton. So I don't know if it's a Tecton killer, but I did like what I heard in this room, and Thomas and Stereo's amp did great with it. And it's like $1,005. I mean, you know, how can you beat that? Well, he does have competition though. Emotiva, in fact, they both have the blue light, and I'll give Thomas credit. He didn't have those bar gauges that show up and blink like Emotivas at least used to do. I have some myself, but I will give some kudos to Emotiva because if you watch my video that I went in there, their customer support is better than most any other high-end brand that I've had experience with. I mean, it is top notch, whether it's email, calling them, and then if you watched, I went into there and I have a customer support issue with probably 6-7 years old surround sound processor that they support, but Dirac doesn't still provide support to that product for running curves. So I can't update my curve if I change my room for my home theater. And if you heard in that video, they were willing to go the extra mile to try to find a way to help me. They didn't immediately pivot and say, like a lot of companies would, oh, no, that's been discontinued. You're going to have to buy one of our new ones. You're going to want the new one. It has all these features. Didn't even say that at all. Said, no, let me see if we can find a way to help you keep using the product you have that you spent good money on, and let's see if we can find a way. No guarantees, but he put me into contact. This is the kind of customer service that you should expect from high-end mega brands that a lot of them don't. And here's a budget brand that's doing a great job with it. So yeah, Thomas in Stereo, I'm sure he's going to give you great support and all that. But here, Emotiva, I can say, legacy, been in the business for a while. I've owned several of their products, especially in the home theater realm. Top-notch service. So if you're offended by all these great brands and price tags scare you, There are some that can still provide high quality performance, great customer service that are both high end without the great ridiculous price tags. I'll just go ahead and say it. So Thompson Stereo, Emotiva, thumbs up on that. I think that's it for now. Let me wrap it up. I'm so tired. Sorry, guys. And I'm going to get started on that video with the Oracle and Eon Arts, as well as the Arc Genesis seminar. So look out for those. And then my subwoofer amp update and time I spent with Angela Gilbert Young. I'm getting tired, guys. I got to go to bed. So sign up, subscribe, and I'll see you back here soon.